If you follow this channel regularly, you know that I am not a great woodworker. See that gap right there? I am not one of these people who find great fulfillment in doing everything myself. I don't find any joy in hanging a lamp or fixing a broken faucet or change the oil on my car. It's not that I can't. I've hung more blinds than I can count and have changed plenty of brake pads. Remember when brake drums was around and you used to have to put that spring back on when you assembled everything again? What I do love is learning new things, and I hope that's why some of you guys also come to this channel from time to time. I follow many makers and have learned many tips and tricks, but one guy stands out, and again, if you follow this channel, you probably know Jimmy Diresta. If you don't follow Jimmy, do so, please. He has so many tricks up his sleeve, and I follow him on YouTube and on Instagram. So go ahead and go and follow Jimmy, show him some love, give him some thumbs up. Last week, Jimmy did this toolbox on Instagram. And he did it one-handed because he had to hold his phone in the other hand. That's just how good he is. But like I said, what I love the most is these small tips and tricks that he shares as he's going through. And I want to share those with you. But, of course, first, we're going to have to model this thing up in Fusion 360. Now, there's many different ways we could model this thing up in Fusion 360, depending on what we want to get out of it. We could use parameters, we could do all different kinds of techniques. But I'm going to show you how I would model it up if I had to make it. Well, actually, I did make it. I'm also going to show you how to make a 2D drawing, so it's easier later on to prove to yourself that you made a mistake by cutting something too short. And maybe if I get some cutters, next week's video could be how we would lay it out and we would program it in CAM in Fusion 360. If you're one of those people who upgraded your level from an old bandsaw to one of these fancy CNC routers. Let's go. All right, so we're gonna start out with a sketch, always a sketch, right? And we're gonna select a plane. So I'm gonna select the top plane here. So always start out with a 2D sketch on a plane. That's how we normally start out here. And I'm gonna go up and select my center rectangle. So already when I do that, I'm probably gonna use some symmetry in my sketch here, and I'll show you that just in a second. So center rectangle, and I'm going to just drag it out here, and you will see that I can put in the numbers. So I'm going to make this one 200 millimeters, hit the tab key, and I'm going to make it by 500 millimeters, just like that, and hit enter. So we end up with a box here. Now this is going to be my top view, and this is kind of going to be the bottom of this toolbox. So I'm using sketches to drive all my modeling downstream. It's what I call skeleton modeling, a layout modeling. It just makes it a lot easier when you come back and you gotta edit things later on. So this sketch is fully defined. It's black, 500 by 200. I'm gonna finish that sketch. Now I'm gonna go up here. I'm just gonna expand out this sketch here, and we can see that we have a little lock on it. It's locked down. It's sketch number 3. I'm going to slow left click on it, and I'm going to change this to top sketch. And I'm going to show you just in a second why I will do that. Because I'm going to use sketches to drive everything, all my modeling, like I said, going downstream. So naming these from the beginning makes it a lot easier. You can also use this view cube kind of like as your guidance here. So the right view is going to be the next one. So I'm going to create a new sketch, and I'm going to do that on that right view plane. You can see when I click on that we're now in the right view, meaning that sketch 4, I'm going to rename that right view. Now, I am going to sketch, and one of the things that can make it easier for you, I think, in the beginning is not to worry too much about placing things in the right location. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If I go up here and click the line command, and out here in space, I'm just going to create a line, and you'll see that it's going to try to snap vertically, what is fine. So I'm just going to go ahead here and place a line, and then I'm going to do one at an angle. I'm going to go over horizontally and down at another, and I'm not even going to worry about where I'm placing this. Actually, the last one here I'm going to place in an angle and hit the little check mark. So this sketch, let me just hit escape to get out of the line command. This sketch here is, you know, completely kind of loose, sitting out in space. Now, what I can do is, this one is sitting on that right plane right there. But what we can do is we can associate this sketch with this sketch. So if we ever decide to go in and change the width of this box, that then this second sketch, the right sketch, or sketch 4, will update with it. So let me go over here and just place myself to the right view here. And one of the ways we can do that is we can hit P on our keyboard, P for project, and I'm just going to select this line, what is the line from our top sketch, and hit OK. And when I do that, you'll see I get kind of like a couple of purple dots here. And that means I now have that as a reference line. And that reference line will update as we're changing the width of the first sketch. So now what I'm going to use is a combination between constraints, what you'll find up here, and dimensions. And you have the dimension tool sitting right over here. So what I can do is I can go over and say, all right, I'm going to make a coincident constraint. And one of my rules of thumb is trying to use constraints first and then dimensions at the end. So I click coincident, and I'm going to place a coincident between the moving point and the stationary point. You see that that slams in there. I could go ahead and do the same thing with the second one. So I can go ahead here and say this one to this one, and you will see how it kind of adjusts like that. Now I'm going to hit escape, and you will see that the sketch is still blue. What means I can grab any of these corners and I can kind of start seeing what is still locked down. See, I can't move this because this is now black and locked down. All right. So then we can move over and we can say, all right, so we saw that we have this vertical here, and we could go over and use that same vertical for this one. We could also go over and use something like a parallel, right? And say this one here, this one here should be parallel to this one. And you will see that now they became parallel. That will do it. We could also start looking at, see, this is going in an angle here, but they're not, this link and this link is not the same length. We could go ahead and say that we could use an equal between this one and this one. And now those two lines will stay equal length, no matter what I kind of like do like this. So these constraints up here can kind of be your friends. Another thing you can do that many times can become helpful is that you can use this symmetry constraint. I find that one useful, and the way that we could use that one would be to draw a line. So I'm going to go over here and select line, or hit alpha line. I'm just going to create a line up here. And if I want to get out of it, I can just double click and we have a line right there. We could use the symmetry, and the symmetry works by saying this point, and then select the line. And then this is now symmetry with that, what means that whenever I drag things now, like now we have this symmetry in here where we can move that. So I'm really using all my constraints up here to try to get as far as I can before I'm going to put dimensions on it. By the way, if you want to make that one construction, you can select it and hit construction line, and then it becomes a dotted line here. All right. So now let's add some dimensions to lock this one down. So I'm going to hit D on my keyboard, or you could select up here. Same thing. D on my keyboard. And let's go ahead here, and I'm going to make this one 85. Like that. And I also know that I'm going to make this one here to here. I'm going to make this one 200 tall. And then this happens, and you're thinking like, oh my goodness, what just happened? Well, what happened was that the predefined angle I had here over constrained the sketch, and it's just really just a bad placement error. The way out of it is like you can just do a Control Z and then an undo, right, to get back here. and then we could just go ahead here and just change. If I delete this dimension here, we could just change this up here to a different angle, and then when we hit the sketch dimension, you will see that now it's going to work. So it's just because I had my oops, it escapes. Get out of this. I had my line too far down, and Fusion kind of crossed these two lines because it could go two directions and it chose the wrong one. So 50-50, it selects the wrong one. Now you look at this and you think, all right, this is pretty good, right? But you can see that we still have something that is blue, and the easiest way to do is just grab a corner and start moving, and you can see that we probably want to put some kind of a dimension on it here. So I'm going to go ahead here and do a dimension, and you do that by clicking a line and another line, and then we get a dimension here. And I'm going to place this dimension here, and I'm thinking I'm going to make it 150, what looks pretty good. Now I want you to focus, just take note of that I use this dimension to make it 150, because when you actually go to make this in Word, then I'll show you another way when we get to the drawing on how I would dimension this, because I don't know about you, but doing something in 150 degrees could be problematic or hard to calculate or something like that. Last thing we need here is I need a hole to put the handle in. So I'm going to go up and select a center. And you will see that it does going to snap into kind of the center line here. And if you do that, then it's going to be vertical. I'll kind of try to align it vertical. And I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to make that 25 millimeters in diameter. And you will see that I can still kind of move it around, though. It hasn't been locked down. So we can see we got to move it. We got to control it this way, and we got to control it this way too. So one way we could make it vertical is by going and hit the vertical horizontal relationship here and say this point to this point. And now I cannot move it sideways, but I can move it up and down. And I'm going to use the last dimension I have here between this center point and here to place that. And I'm going to make that 170. Now this sketch is fully defined, and I use constraints as much as possible. So the only things that I have in here as dimensions are these here. And the only reason for that is it makes it easier when you come back in 6 months to look at this again, that you can remember what it was. Now another thing I just wanted to highlight was that we use that projected line down here, what means that, let me just rename this to right side sketch so I can see what sketch is what. But if I go in here, I can right click on this top sketch here and I can say show dimension, and if I double click on this 200 and I change that to 150, you see how this will follow. Now you could be intelligent the way you do your sketches. Like right now I know that if I go probably 80, then I gotta get this here. You could be intelligent and try to find some ways to make some calculations where things maybe scale down or something else. But the idea about this is that if we decided that we're gonna make a smaller, bigger box, that this kind of updates with that. That was the idea about that projected line. And this is what I need for my my right view. Now I need my front view here. So I'm going to create a new sketch, and I'm going to do that on that front plane. And I'm gonna go ahead and do what I did before. I'm going to hit P for project, and I'm going to capture that bottom line and kind of do the same thing as I did before. So if it ever changes size, but I'm going to do this showing you. I'm going to show you a couple of things here, just that you might run into. So I'm going to this time select the 2-point rectangle. And I'm going to select this corner here. And I'm just going to draw out a rectangle. Now, it won't snap to that point, so I'm going to have to constrain that. But I'm just going to go ahead and place it somewhere around here. And then I could now go ahead and I could select coincident. And I could find that point right there. Zoom in if you can't see it. like 1 pixel. There. So there, and then I got that. Now it's still blue on top because I haven't defined my height yet. But I wanted to show you something else before we do that. We could go ahead here. I want to create a scenario where I'm actually going to run into some issues. So I'm going to go ahead here and select another 2-point rectangle, and I'm going to go ahead here and create a little lip there. And now I might want to start doing some dimensions. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to create a dimension from here to here. And I'm going to say I'm going to make that 53. And I'm actually going to do the same thing over here. 53. Now I'm going to break this just in a second. And then I also know that I need this to be, I want this to be 60 right there. And just for the heck of it, let me just throw that other dimension on there too. Remember what that was? That was supposed to be 85 from the first one. Now you do this, and then I wanted a radius to go down here. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to select an arc, and I like the 3-point arc. And the 3-point arc, if you hold over, it comes up with a little dialog saying place start point. So I'm going to place a start point. And then it says place an endpoint. I'm going to place an endpoint down here. And then it's kind of want to select the midpoint of it. Now, if I move it down here, you see that it snaps and I get a tangency. See, if you look at that little icon of that tangent arc, that actually shows up on my part here and shows me that I got this. So this is actually pretty good. So I'm going to left click to place it, and that's good. Now it's blue because it's underdefined. But I'm going to go ahead and create another one in the same kind of way down here, place it here, and snap it down to the tangent like that. Okay. So what people many times will do is that they will say, all right, so let me go ahead and put a dimension on that. So D for dimension. And I'm going to make that 40. That's good. Okay, I'm going to do another one, D for dimension. Oh. And I'm going to make that one 40. Now we see that the sketch is fully defined. Then if we go up and we use the trim, and I say I want to remove this, I want to move this, I remove this, this, and this, suddenly you will see that things turns blue. And people are like, why is it turning blue suddenly? Well, the reason it's turning blue is because when we are trimming these different items, we are actually removing these dimensions, if you see it, because we're trimming this line, what means that this line gets created into another segment just between the two radiuses, and that means that the 60 will get lost. Or that section between that will get lost. It still keeps the line. If I go ahead and select this top line here, then it's losing that line when I create those two there. So it loses those segments when I'm not sure if this is a good way to show it, but when you do these trims, you're losing segments and things can turn blue. That's a warning because now your sketch is underdefined. So that's a thing to kind of keep in mind. And now the only fix here, if you're going this way around it, well, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's you kind of got to go in and redo these dimensions again to make it fully defined. So how would I do this? Well, I would normally not put any dimension on it until I got it to where I want it. So I wouldn't put any dimensions on this thing until I got all the things drawn up. It's kind of what you saw I did on the one before. So I would draw all this stuff up and then I would start dimensioning it. So let me show you a couple of tricks to do that. So if we go ahead here now, we could go ahead and we can trim these, and we're not running into any issues with things going, like work we have done already becoming like that. All right, so let me show you a couple of tricks here that you might find useful. So one I probably would start out with is this 85. So let me just, move this down a little bit. So the first one here was 85. Now, if I just finish this, stop the sketch for a second, you know that we have 85 over here. And there's a couple of different ways we could do this. We could do like a projected at a point from here in our sketch, and then we could align with that. So let me show you that. So we could go ahead here, go back into our sketch here, and we could do a P for project, and we could find that intersection. See, that's right there. And I could project it up there, and now I have that point. So we could go ahead and do a coincident of this line to this point. Now make sure you don't select the point and make that coincident. If I select the point to there, then it would actually blow up. They will bring the line over. Let me undo that. But if you're selecting the point, the line and then the point, then it will do the coincident. Another trick that I want you to know is, if I get out of this sketch, is that every dimension, let's go back to this sketch, every dimension has a name and a number, or a letter and a number. You see how this one says D385. So what we can actually do, I'm just hovering over it, that's how I got it to appear, just hover over the dimension. What we can actually do is we can go back into our other sketch, edit sketch, and we can go ahead and select D for dimension, select this line, and then I can type in D3. Now when I do that, you will see that it shows up FX, what means that this dimension is driven by something else. This dimension is driven by the other dimension. So if we go back into this dimension here, this dimension, and we change this to 75, and we go back into this one, you will see now this is 75. So our second sketch is now driving this one. Okay? Now another thing we can do that can be helpful is that if we go ahead here and select D for dimension, and I'm going to make this one 53. Now we can also, we used it before, we can go ahead and use the equal command and say, I want this line to be equal with this line. And now those two lines are the same length, so I don't have to place two dimensions. That also, of course, goes for D for dimension for this. If I know I want this to be 40, there's no reason to place another dimension down here. I might as well say that this one is equal to this one, and then that will always stay 40. And then the last dimension we need is from here to here, and make that 60, and our sketch is fully defined. Let me just move the 60 down here so they all are kind of like in one corner by itself. So I hope this is somewhat useful. Different ways you can do things in here. So we created 3 sketches, and that is all the sketches we need to create this toolbox. Now, we have created these different sketches, and we can now go ahead and we'll rename this one. So this is the front side sketch, or front right side sketch, whatever. So we now have these 3 sketches that is driving different areas. So if we go ahead here and change this to 600, that wall will update. And if we go and change that, we know that this sketch is updating. So the fewer dimensions you have on your sketches, the easier it is kind of going in and making modifications. All right, so now we are ready to go ahead and make solids. But we are not going to, we're going to have these sketches up on top, and then we're going to have our bodies further down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and say new component, and I get to give the component a name, and I'm going to call this one bottom. So I'm starting with the bottom. And when you do that, you get this little fish eye showing us that this component is now active, and that's why everything kind of like got shaded or cloudy, is because this is now active. If we go up and we click up here, then the whole assembly is now active. If we go down and click here, this only component is active. All right, so with that active, I'm going to go ahead and say extrude, and I'm going to select that bottom, and I want to go minus here. So I'm going to go minus 12. So that is my bottom. Pretty easy. That was the easiest part of the whole thing. Let's go ahead and create another component. And I'm going to call this one my side. Like this. And I'm going to go ahead and hit extrude again. And I'm going to select our side view here. Now, notice how it's actually extruding from the center. And that's one of the, in the standard extrude command, one of the options you have here is where do you want the profile to start from. That's a lot of great information over here. So we can go over here and say, well, I want it to start from an object, and then I'm going to select that face from that solid we just created. And then I'm just going to drag the arrow the other way and say I'm going to go minus 12 millimeters and hit OK. And now we have a side here that that sits on the bottom, starting right on that intersection right there. If we go ahead and we make the bottom active, we will see that that becomes active, and the whole thing looks somewhat like that. Now I'm going to cheat right now and actually just mirror this because I need two of these. So I'm going to go to create. I'm going to go to mirror. And instead of the default faces, I'm going to go ahead here and select components because that's what we have here. This is components. I'm going to select the object and the mirror plane. I'm just going to select that plane right there. See, now I use symmetry again and I have that other one sitting right there. So now we got that. So that's pretty good. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm realizing that I might run into a little bit of a scenario here that my third sketch, my front side sketch, actually interferes. This should probably just have gone to where these are ending, but I'm going to deal with that and show you a little trick on how I can do that. So let me go ahead here and right click and say new component. And actually I should probably call these, let me just cancel out of that. Actually, this is not a side, this is an end. End. Slow left click, and that's better. I want to call the next one a side, new component. I want to call that a side. And I'm going to do what you saw me do before. I'm going to hit extrude. I'm going to select that thing, right? But again, it's not where I want it to start. So I'm going to say from object, and I'm going to select that face there. And this is the same as before. I want it to be minus, well, it's actually plus 12. And just go ahead here, make sure new body's on, and hit OK. And rename that, because I didn't do that when I created it. Oh, I messed something upside. And then I'm just going to rinse and repeat what you saw me do before. And I actually don't have to be in the top document to mirror. I could be in here. It's still smart enough to know where to place it. So mirror. It remembers now this component. And I'm going to select that mirror plane right there and hit OK. Let me move up to our top component here so we can kind of see the whole thing. And this looks pretty good, but we realize though that we do have an issue here. Like, Diresta is good, but there's no way we can merge these two corners together without cutting something away. So we can cut away, and the technique we're going to use is this. It's called combine, but it's a little misleading because it actually does other things. So I'm going to click on that, and instead of joining, I'm going to say cutting. And I'm going to show what body is it that I want to target. And in my case, I decided, just because of the 85 and everything, that I'm going to cut these panels shorter. So I'm going to select that. And then it says select the tool bodies. And the bodies, you can only cut one body at a time. So I have to do this twice. But I can use 2 tool bodies. That's going to be these 2. They're the ones I'm going to cut with. But if I just hit OK, they're going to go away. So I'm going to make sure to check Keep Tools. Hit OK. And now that got cut a little shorter. And then I'm just going to repeat that. So I'm going to right-click, repeat, combine, select this panel, and then I'm going to select this one and this one to cut, and keep tools and hit it like that. Now, somebody would say, well, you're adding too many in here, because what I could do was if I just go back and I just select this one down here and hit delete. See, we mirrored this over here, right? We mirrored over that body to that, or that component to that component. Well, what would happen if I dragged this one, hold down left mouse button, and I dragged it over here? So you can reorder this timeline if things are depending on one another. So instead of doing 2, I'm now doing, if I move this back, I'm now doing the cut before I mirrored. There's many different ways to do this. All right, the last one I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to do the handle, but my sketches are gone, because as you are doing extrusions, Fusion kind of consumes the sketch. Well, we know that it's this sketch up here. I can just turn it right back on and it shows up. And now we can go ahead and do another new component, what we're going to call handle. And I'm going to extrude here. And we can go symmetric, like this. And we can either choose if we want to be the whole length it goes, or you can kind of divide the measurements, whatever you want to do. I'm going to do whole length here, but instead of giving it a distance, I bet you that the overall length of this is D1 on my dimension. So I'm going to hit D1, and now it looks like that is the right dimension. If I hit D2, then it would be the 200. We all remember what D3 is. That's the 85, right? So D1 is that 500, the first dimension I placed for the length of this box. What means that, going back to full circle, that if we go, I'm going to turn that sketch off again. If we go into our first sketch here, remember that 500, edit that sketch. If you made that 150, that will update. That didn't update. That is interesting. Review warning. The profile reference is lost. Try to edit the feature to reselect the profile. So something went wrong here. So I want to edit the profile sketch. Oh, see, something gets screwed up here. I bet you that's why it's... You see, so this is a typical... This is a typical issue. So you see how you get these get a yellow warning? And of course it didn't update. The reason it doesn't update, if I go in and edit that sketch, that's the same as the front side sketch. You see how the sketch is intersecting itself. What means that Fusion says, dude, I can't solve this, and therefore it stays the original length. Now, it simply just means that because I made these two 40 and the way with the 53, they can't be this small. So let's go in and edit the sketch again. Now, what happens if I make it 200? Now it updates, because now radiuses don't intersect. So that's one of those small things that just that was a lunch pail. This is one of those things that, oh, wrong sketch. This is one of the things that I hope that that you learn something from. So we can update that, the handle updates, and the side updates too. So this gives us this box here. Now the last thing I would probably do is we maybe want to put some appearances on it just to make it look a little bit more realistic. And the way we can do that is out in space, we can right click and, well, right click on one of these parts and we can do appearances and you can actually search. So let's probably make it out of pine. So there's a pine right there. And if I drag it up here on this ring up here, then the whole thing will change appearance. And now it looks more like this box here. Now, we're almost done. A couple of things. I would not put screws in this thing. For me to go and make this one, I would not place the screws. You could. We could go up here to insert and we could go to make master components. We can put all the screws in and things like that. You could lay it out like that, but I'm not going to do that. But another thing that we still have to do is this became an assembly. And, well, to fix that, we have to do something because every component here can move. And that's not what we want. So we're going to have to lock this down. Now, we're going to have to select one part that is going to be locked in space. And I'm going to select the bottom. Just makes more sense to me. I'm going to right-click and ground it. So right-click and ground it so you get a little thumbtack. And now, because of the way I model this up with these layout sketches, I know everything is where I want it right now. And then I can use this as-built joint. And the as-built joint, just let me click on as-built joint, and I'm going to select on this component and the base here, the bottom, and I can say that those two should be rigid. And then that is locked in. I can't drag that off anymore. The other ones can still drag off, but not that one. And then we can just go ahead here and repeat as-built joint. Say this component, they're going to be rigid. Right-click. Repeat as-built joint, this component this side, right click, this component this side, right click, and maybe this component right side. And then it's all, we got all the rigid joint down here, and now nothing moves a bit. I'm going to click the little eye here to turn off my joint icon there in the center. All right, so now this box is actually how I would model this up and be good to go. Now, like I said, next week we might do this in a CNC, and then we're going to do some other things. We're going to have to lay it down flat to cut it out on the CNC router. But because I got to build this part on like old-fashioned bandsaws and stuff like that, I'm actually going to make a work drawing for this. So to do that, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to say a new drawing from design, and I'm going to be asked here to save it. So I'm going to call this Diresta Toolbox. And I'm just going to select the default new assembly here. Click OK to that. And it's going to open up the 2D drawing. So we have now a new 2D drawing here, and we have our toolbox is still sitting up here. We can go between the two. All right. First thing we're going to do is we're going to insert a base view. I'm going to click on that, and our base view come in here. Now, when I did the what's new in drawings, I showed you how to create a bill of material and all different kinds of stuff. I'm not going to do this for this one because this is a work drawing really for me. Just to be able to make this part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this box about right here. And I'm just going to hit OK to that. And we get kind of this box here. Now, when you do that, you get all the different components. But what I actually want to do is I kind of want to show everything on one drawing. So I'm going to insert multiple base views. And one of the things you could do is I could go over here and say I want to have an isometric view like this here maybe. I could place an isometric view down here just so I can see what the heck I'm trying to build. And I'm going to make that shaded. Right, so then we kind of have the box here. So when I insert new base views, you will see that I get the different components. Now I can turn them on and off of whatever I want. So what I can now do is I'm actually going to insert another base view. And instead of here at the front, I'm going to select the right view. Remember that? I'm just going to place it somewhere over here. So I'll line it somewhat up. And I'm going to select another view, and I'm going to make that the top. So I'm actually selecting the views that you saw me using before. But what I'm going to do is now I'm going to turn off the components that I don't want in that view. So for example, on our top view over here, I'm going to uncheck bottom. And I'm also going to uncheck the ends. So it only shows the side and the handle. And on the next one, not that one, we're going to leave that one alone. This one, I am going to turn off the bottom. And I can turn off one of the ends, and I can turn off the sides, and I can turn off the other side, and I can turn off the handle. Right? So I'm kind of like cleaning that up. And the last one, I'm really just going to show the bottom. So I'm using these different base views to show this. Now, we can go ahead and add some dimensions. And actually, what I'm missing here is I'm missing a thickness. So then we can use a projected view. If I click a projected view of this box here, and I move my mouse over, you will see that I kind of get a projected view. So I'm going to click here and place a projected view of that box. All right. Now I'm going to show you how to put some dimensions on it. So our rod here was 25. And remember what this one was? That was the 85 we did before. I probably want this one. Oh, I thought that we made that one 53. We're going to go and look at that. Oh, that's because we're actually looking at, we cut it in half. So that's right. This is going to be 41 because we cut a section of it. What else do we do? We have this one to here, 60. I hope that you got why this is, because I cut the side of it, then it only become 53. That's true. And then we got the 60 here, right? You can take that and we'll maybe drag it outside here. Looks a little more professional. And let's hit another. Then this length here is different too. It's going to be 476. This one is going to be the 200 by 500. And then we need a thickness of this little sucker to show us that it's a 12 millimeter thick. Now I want to show you that, and if you remember when we were doing this pot over here, when I dimensioned this, I dimensioned it with 150 in here. And there's nothing wrong with this, but I know that when I'm standing down at the shop floor trying to make this, that doing degrees is always a pain in the neck. Like unless you got to go and find a saw, you can rotate a saw or something like that. So instead of using the standard dimension tool, be aware of that there's also something called alternate dimensions. And alternate dimensions is actually kind of cool because what it will let you do is it will let me do these dimensions in a way that might make it a little bit easier for me to measure when I'm out. See, this is going to be 200 when I'm out there, because I can actually now say, I can make a measurement from here to here, say that's 85, and then I can make a measurement from here in 66.4, and then it would show me that angle that I got to create. So that's my tip. Hope it was a good tip. And if we wanted another dimension to kind of prove ourselves, and then do this here. I should probably spend a little time lining all these dimensions up, but I think you get the gist of it. I don't know why I would make them these out so far. All right. Oh, the last one we need is we also need to put a dimension here. I would probably just find something that gave me a radius that's close to that paint can or something. I don't know. So that is going to be our sheet. And the only thing we need to really do now before we go ahead and run this part is by going and print this out. So go and hit the print. And I got my little Samsung M2020 and I'll print that. So with that, we get the paper drawing. This is the way we can prove that if we make any mistakes, I would probably have cut that 500. I'd already forgotten that was going. All right, with the printer starting up, we will get to the shop floor. Okay, so the next 4 or 5 minutes going to be some Diresta tips and tricks here. So you can see that on one side I have drawn up kind of like the path that I'm going to be using in the bandsaw. And here's a Jimmy trick: use hot glue. I've never seen anybody else use hot glue as much as Jimmy Diresta does, but this is awesome. See, I marked where the scrap piece is going to be, and that's where I'm applying the hot glue. What means that when you get over to your bandsaw, these two pieces are now glued together, right? When you do your cut on the bandsaw, you're going to get two identical pieces. So this is a great way to kind of make two identical pieces. This scrap is glued together, but the two pieces you actually need are not. I would never have thought this. All right, here's another trick. So I have marked our line here. This is like our 150 degrees. And I'm cutting that on my old trusted DeWalt. Now here I'm kind of like trying to get it close to the line. And look at this, using a pencil to draw on the board itself. And now this is not probably super accurate, but for this project it was super easy to just go ahead and line that up. And I was able to make two pieces. Actually, one piece was a little bit long because the cut I had made prior I'd made one piece a little bit longer. But this was a way to get very quickly 4 sides that is identical. All right, next tip here and this is where I made a little bit of a mistake, but you're learning. But this is another thing that I would not have thought about that Jimmy taught me, was to glue in the pieces and then let that sit for 20 minutes and let the glue harden, because that makes it a lot easier to put the screws in later on. See, I would have been standing there trying to monkey around with the screws and line everything up. And you can see here on this image that I've actually already screwed in the side pieces. But the fact that when you glue it in first, and then it's much easier to align your screws, instead of like trying to do it all when everything is loose, trying to screw the screws in and stuff like that. So I thought that was another super cool trick. And I also installed the handle here. I actually just glued that in. All right. So here is another trick that I would not have thought about. And look at how I'm taking the pencil and I'm using my finger as a guide and finding the middle of the plywood, and then I can literally just trace along the sides, and that way I know where the center of my plywood is for drilling my holes. Again, I would have been standing there trying to do 6 millimeters in with a tape measure and draw a line, but using that technique of just taking the pencil and using your finger kind of the guide, it worked amazingly. So again, one of these other tricks that, you know what, Jimmy, thank you. I would never thought about doing it like that. All right, it's almost done. Doing a little bit of sanding, and I could probably spend some more time on the sanding here. I should have, but, you know, always under a deadline. And then Jimmy, you know, always is good at making sure that his branding is on it. So I'll also make sure that, well, Autodesk branding is on it. So hashtag Autodesk. So I hope that you found this video useful. Hopefully there was one or two tricks in there. Thank you to Jimmy for always sharing your information and your knowledge. Love it. Until the next time, take care.